The late afternoon sun painted the arid hills surrounding Harmony Creek, a dusty, forgotten village in the heart of the American Old West, in hues of rusty orange. The dry, ceaseless wind, a constant companion to that landscape, stirred up eddies of dirt whipping against the wooden walls of the houses and the few gnarled trees. On the porch of the Miller home, Sarah May, a young woman in her early 20s, with an inner strength that belied her slender figure, watched with a heavy heart as a familiar family spectacle unfolded in front of the small wooden church. There, under the lens of a weary-faced traveling photographer, the Miller family, her own family, posed for a picture. Her father, Elias Miller, a man with features hardened by sun and tough living, adjusted his wife Martha's hat with a rare gesture of tenderness. Martha, in turn, displayed a forced smile, her eyes fixed on the camera, while her sons, Caleb and Josiah, Sarah's brothers, laughed and jostled, their Sunday clothes impeccable, clean of the dust that permeated everything. Sarah, wearing a faded cotton dress that no longer fit her well, her hands calloused from the endless tasks in the fields and kitchen, was, as always, deliberately ignored. Since the death of her biological mother many years ago, when Sarah was still a girl, Elias had remarried Martha. For Martha, Sarah was not a daughter, but a burden, a living reminder of a past she longed to erase. Her brothers, infected by their stepmother's coldness, treated her with a cutting indifference, as if she were a stranger in her own home. The photographer, a stout man who traveled between the small settlements, adjusted his tripod with a grunt. "Everyone together now, a beautiful smile for posterity," he exclaimed, his voice muffled by the wind. Martha, with a plastered-on smile, arranged her children around her, forming a human barrier that sealed Sarah's exclusion. Elias's gaze toward his daughter was empty, laden with a chilling indifference that echoed the void she felt in her chest. Hot, bitter tears streamed down Sarah's face, but she quickly wiped them away with the back of her hand, a learned gesture of disguise. The metallic click of the shutter seemed to reverberate in her soul, forever imprinting the image of her solitude. The dry wind kicked up dust again, whipping her face as if the desert itself mourned with her. Sadness squeezed her, but behind the sharp pain, a quiet, stubborn flame of determination began to burn within her. The days that followed the photograph incident were a relentless blur of routine and silent suffering for Sarah. The sun rose and set, marking another day of unending chores. She worked tirelessly, tending to the stubborn livestock, mending her family's worn clothes by the dim lamplight, and cooking meager meals over a sputtering fire. Yet her efforts were always met with Martha's sharp words of disdain and Elias's unchanging, stony indifference. The weight of her ostracism pressed down on her, making each breath feel heavy, each task a reminder of her unwanted status. She longed for a life beyond the choking dust and the oppressive confines of the Miller household, a life where she was seen, valued, and respected. One sweltering afternoon, as the midday sun beat down relentlessly on the parched earth, Sarah made her usual delivery of fresh eggs to the general store. The air inside was thick with the scent of dried herbs, leather, and molasses. There, amidst the barrels and crates, she overheard a conversation that ignited a tiny, yet potent flicker of hope within her. Two grizzled ranchers, their faces weathered like old leather, were discussing the recent arrival of Judge Thomas Blackwood to Harmony Creek. Blackwood was a name whispered with respect throughout the territory, not just for his keen legal mind and his unwavering sense of justice, but for his quiet, dignified presence. He had settled several complex land disputes with a fairness that surprised many, and had a reputation for seeing past, superficial appearances and social standing, a stark contrast to the shallow judgments Sarah faced daily. Later that week, while Fetching water from the communal well, its wooden bucket groaning as she drew it up, Sarah found herself unexpectedly face to face with the judge. He was a man in his late 40s, with kind, discerning eyes that seemed to hold a vast understanding of the world, and a neatly trimmed beard. He wore practical, yet impeccably maintained clothes, a subtle indication of his status without being ostentatious. Unlike the flashy attire of other influential men who passed through the town, their first interaction was brief, almost fleeting. He offered a polite nod, a small, almost imperceptible gesture of acknowledgement. Sarah, unaccustomed to such simple courtesy, mumbled a shy greeting in return, her cheeks flushing. Yet in that fleeting moment, she sensed a genuine respect in his gaze, a quiet recognition of her as an individual, not just a forgotten shadow of the Miller family. This small, unexpected acknowledgement, like a distant bell ringing in the wilderness, stirred something profound within her, a quiet resolve to seek out a different path, to carve a place for herself where she would be seen for who she truly was. Driven by a desperate, burgeoning need for change and a budding sense of self-worth that had been dormant for so long, Sarah began to subtly seek out opportunities to be near Judge Blackwood. It wasn't a calculated plan, but an instinctual pull towards someone who saw her. She started attending the infrequent town meetings held in the dusty community hall, not to speak, but to observe, to listen to his measured words, and to see how he interacted with the varied personalities of Harmony Creek. She noticed his remarkable patience, his careful consideration of every argument, even the most poorly articulated, and his quiet, unyielding strength that seemed to anchor the room. One sweltering afternoon, the kind where the air shimmered above the cracked earth, a stray dog, half-starved and limping from an unknown injury, wandered into Harmony Creek. Its ribs showed beneath its matted fur, and its eyes held a profound sadness. The townspeople, mostly preoccupied with their own struggles for survival, either ignored it or, worse, shooed it away with shouts and stones. Sarah, her heart aching with a familiar pang of loneliness for the creature, found a quiet corner behind the general store, where she could offer it some scraps of food she'd painstakingly saved from her own meager meals. To her surprise, Judge Blackwood, on his way to his temporary office, stopped and watched her. He didn't offer advice or criticism. He simply observed her gentle kindness, the tender way she spoke to the frightened animal. "That's a good heart you have, young woman," he said, his voice low and steady, carrying the warmth of genuine appreciation. Sarah, startled by his unexpected presence and even more by his words, looked up, her eyes wide. This was the first genuine compliment she had received in years, a balm to her wounded spirit. Over the next few days, the judge made it a point to offer a polite word or a brief, encouraging comment whenever their paths crossed. He inquired about her work, listened attentively to her simple replies without judgment, and treated her with a consistent courtesy she had never known from anyone in her family. Slowly, tentatively, an unlikely friendship began to form. Sarah found herself opening up, sharing her quiet struggles and her silent dreams, surprised by his genuine empathy and understanding. He saw beyond her worn clothes and the Miller family's blatant scorn. He saw her intelligence, her unwavering resilience, and her inherent goodness, qualities that had been hidden for so long. As Judge Blackwood's legal work in Harmony Creek continued, his presence becoming a steady, calming force in the often turbulent small town, he found himself increasingly and genuinely impressed by Sarah May. He observed her sharp mind when she offered a surprisingly insightful comment on a complex local land dispute he was overseeing, her quiet dignity even in the face of snubs, and her unwavering work ethic that put many others to shame. He would often seek her out for a brief conversation, finding solace and genuine connection in her honesty and her remarkably clear-sighted perspective on the town's often petty matters. Their conversations, initially about general topics like the weather or the state of the crops, began to delve deeper, touching upon the profound challenges of life in the raw, untamed West and the timeless importance of justice, fairness, and human decency. The growing yet discreet connection between Sarah and Judge Blackwood did not, however, go unnoticed in Harmony Creek. The small town was a hotbed of gossip and speculation, where news traveled faster than the dust storms. Whispers began to circulate, particularly among the more idle and gossipy members of the community, those who thrived on others' misfortunes. "It's strange," one woman would murmur to another, her voice laced with suspicion. The Miller girl, always so quiet and practically invisible, spending so much time with the judge. Martha Miller, her face a mask of seething jealousy and deep-seated resentment, actively fanned the flames of these rumors. She openly dismissed Sarah's quiet interactions with the judge, painting her as manipulative and opportunistic, unable to fathom why a man of the judge's standing would show any genuine interest in her stepdaughter, whom Martha considered worthless. Elias, ever the apathetic figure, simply ignored the burgeoning talk, his disinterest in Sarah still paramount, too absorbed in his own silent world. Despite the veiled glances, the hushed conversations, and the malicious gossip that swirled around her, Sarah found an unprecedented solace and strength in the judge's company. For the first time in her life, she felt truly seen, heard, and genuinely respected. His quiet encouragement was like water on parched earth, bolstering her confidence and nurturing a burgeoning sense of self-worth. She began to carry herself with a new sense of purpose, her shoulders straighter, her gaze more direct. She learned from his deep wisdom, his calm, unshakable demeanor, and his unwavering moral compass, which seemed to point always towards what was right. He, in turn, found a quiet strength, a resilient spirit, and a genuine warmth in Sarah, a refreshing and authentic change from the often superficial and calculating interactions he experienced in his profession. As the date for the annual Harmony Creek Harvest Festival and Ball rapidly approached, the entire town buzzed with preparations. Decorations, special dishes, new clothes, and the whispers about Sarah and the judge grew louder, more insistent, setting the stage for an unexpected and truly revealing turn of events. The crisp evening air of the Harmony Creek Harvest Festival and Ball was alive with the earthy scent of pine boughs strung for decoration and the sweet aroma of freshly baked peas. The town hall, usually a somber place for meetings, was transformed, bathed in the warm, flickering glow of countless lanterns, and the lively, foot-stomping strains of a fiddle band filled every corner of the room, beckoning everyone to dance. The Miller family, dressed in their finest, arrived early, Martha's silk dress rustling ostentatiously as she swept into the room, her sons Caleb and Josiah trailing behind her like dutiful shadows. They made their way to a prominent spot, Martha exchanging exaggerated greetings and feigning politeness with other townsfolk, all while her eyes darted around the room, subtly looking for Sarah, expecting her to be in the background, perhaps helping with refreshments, or more likely not daring to show her face at all. Sarah, however, had spent the entire day preparing for this evening in quiet, determined secrecy. With the modest savings she had painstakingly gathered from odd jobs, washing laundry for other families, helping with gardening, and a small, thoughtful gift from Judge Blackwood, a length of simple but elegant fabric from the nearest mercantile. In the larger town 2 days' ride away, she had sewn herself a new dress. It wasn't opulent or adorned with frills, but it was meticulously well fitted, a deep indigo blue that brought out the vibrant color of her eyes and complemented her fair complexion. She had brushed her long, dark hair until it shone, tying it, back simply yet gracefully with a matching ribbon. There was a quiet dignity in her appearance that night, a striking contrast to the faded, ill-fitting clothes she usually wore. As the music swelled to a joyous crescendo, the heavy double doors of the town hall swung open. A sudden collective hush fell over the usually boisterous crowd as Judge Thomas Blackwood entered, his presence commanding immediate respect. And then a palpable gasp rippled through the room, a wave of shock and disbelief. Standing beside him, her hand gently resting in his, her head held high, was Sarah May. Her gaze was steady, meeting the shocked stares of the townsfolk without flinching, and a small, confident smile played on her lips. She looked not like the meek, overlooked girl they had always known, but a woman utterly transformed, radiating a quiet strength and an undeniable self-assurance that shone brighter than any lantern. Martha Miller's face contorted in a grotesque mixture of shock and outrage, her carefully constructed forced smile crumbling into a bewildered sneer. Elias, for the first time in years, looked directly at Sarah with a flicker of something akin to genuine surprise, perhaps even a nascent regret, in his otherwise impassive eyes. Caleb and Josiah stared, bewildered, unable to reconcile the elegant woman before them with the sister they had so easily dismissed. The whispers resumed, but this time they were tinged with awe, curiosity, and grudging admiration rather than malice. Judge Blackwood, with a gentle, reassuring squeeze of Sarah's hand, led her to the center of the room. He addressed the stunned crowd, his voice clear, resonant, and carrying an undeniable authority. "Good evening, everyone. I am honored to attend this celebration, and equally honored to introduce you to Miss Sarah May Miller." He paused, his discerning gaze sweeping over the faces, lingering for a significant moment on the Millers, who now seemed to shrink under his gaze. "Miss Miller has shown me immense kindness, remarkable wisdom, and a truly resilient spirit during my time in Harmony Creek. She is a woman of integrity and character, and I'm proud to call her my friend." He then, with a respectful bow that held an unexpected tenderness, extended his hand to Sarah, inviting her to dance. As they glided across the polished floor, moving with an easy, natural grace, the palpable tension in the room began to dissipate, replaced by a ripple of quiet admiration and grudging acceptance. Sarah, no longer an outcast, danced with the town's most respected figure, her past exclusion, the hurtful family photograph, completely overshadowed by her present dignity and the profound respect she had earned. The family who had so cruelly left her out of their picture now watched, helpless and astonished, as she stepped confidently into a new chapter, not just seen, but truly valued by the very heart of their community.